Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. I am thrilled, as always, to bring back Dave Smith, one of the Legion of Skanks, host of Part of the Problem. His comedy special Libertas hit #1 on the iTunes charts and is available now. Dave, welcome back to one of my favorite. I love doing these episodes because I don't got to do work because it's so fun and easy to talk to you and everyone enjoys it, except for those who don't, which I enjoy even more.
Yeah, it's a win-win. No, I feel the same way about the episodes where I have you on. First off, I always really enjoy it. It's always guaranteed to do really good numbers for me. And I never have to do any work for them. I'm like, I don't know, I'll just start asking Michael questions about the stuff I want to talk about, and then we'll lead into a good conversation.
My favorite comment is like, oh God, another hour of these dudes blowing smoke up each other's ass. And it's like, yeah, we're friends who admire each other. And like,
you also don't have to listen to it. I mean, it's like, it's really funny. I get this a lot with people, like, you'll see like on Twitter where people are like, it's like, oh God, this guy just fucking sucks. And he's always doing this. And then you look and they follow you and you're like, well, why are you doing this then? What is this dance?
My favorite thing, well, not my favorite thing, but one of the things I enjoy is if you like slam someone really hard on Twitter, like 10 minutes later they follow you because they got some traction from daddy, and now they're hoping they're going to get it again. So I'll do that, then I'll mute them and they'll stay there for months. And the only way I'll know is when like one of my followers like replies to them, and I'll see, replying to these two people. I've got a like 10 of these reply guys, barnacles I call them, and it's especially the ones that are really funny are the Nazis, because they do you have to deal with those too?
Oh yeah, I've dealt with several in my day.
Like, so that's okay. Let's talk about this. Remember we were saying we're going to have a faux debate where I'm going to be the blue pill libertarian arguing with you. And one of the things I would have said in this debate is, you like Nazis and you're bringing Nazis into libertarianism. What is your approach when because that's the thing. Like, it's true that Kellyanne Conway and everyone to the right of her, everyone to the right of Sanders is a Nazi, right? But there are genuine like Nazis that you and I have interacted with on Twitter.
Well, it's funny because there are certain topics. I remember talking to you about this right after you wrote The New Right. I had you on the show like right after the book came out, and we were talking about the book. And one of the things people would talk about, like the real hard writers critique of your book, like and this is, you got to understand, this is the hard right of the hard right of The New Right. Like, it's a sliver that is legitimately fascistic. And some of them aren't neo-Nazis. And their critique would be like, Michael never even addresses the JQ in the book. He never even deals with it. And your response, which I thought was so good, you're like, well, how can you deal with that?
Right.
I mean, you're already boxed in by the very nature of this conversation, which is like, okay, so if I argue that Jews really are a problem, well, now I have to argue against me and my family and people I love. And if I argue that it's not accurate, well, this can all be dismissed, because of course a Jew would say that the JQ is a bunch of bullshit or whatever, so with sometimes with those guys, I do feel like almost boxed in, where the only thing to do is mock them. Like, I'll get sometimes like these crazies who are just going, off about whatever, it'll be, sometimes they'll claim that I'm part of the Jewish cabal. That's like, this is why I'll engage with hard right wingers, but I tell them not to be identitarian racialists. And he goes, well, of course, that's what the Jew would be saying. And it is like that thing where you're like, well, then what can I say? I mean, there's nothing I can say to this person where I don't lose. That's the game we're playing. So I'll just be like, I can't talk right now. I have weather to control or something. Because what else can you say to somebody like that,
What else is really funny is they have a very social justice warrior perspective of Jews in general, but you and me, therefore, by default. And they genuinely believe that if they mention the Holocaust, we're going to have a meltdown. Whereas I don't know any Jewish person who is a humorist who doesn't have like 6 million Holocaust jokes at the ready.
Yeah, I also don't like, I don't have, there's something I really dislike that's become the kind of dominant corporate, like the method of how you're supposed to feel about bigotry, which is almost like you're supposed to shriek and get your
Yeah,
panties
yeah,
up in a
right.
bunch and be like, oh my God, a bigot is just the worst thing you can do ever. And I just don't have that. I don't know. It doesn't seem to make sense to me. And particularly as a libertarian, as someone who lives in the world of like wars where hundreds of thousands of people
Right.
are slaughtered, and politicians selling out, like the generation of children that like coming up in the world, and whatever, lockdowns and bailouts and people being locked in cages for like life in jail for distributing plants and just all the stuff we talk about all the time. It's like someone's like, hey, I don't like that group of people. You're like, all right, well, I think that's stupid, but it's not like, it doesn't like make my blood boil. So I've dealt with people before where it's just like, oh, they clearly don't like Jews. And I'm like, all right, well, I don't really like that person.
Yeah,
And
it's
I just don't understand why I'm supposed to have this like shrieking attitude. But the thing, that I run into a lot.
well, just one more thing,
Sure,
especially
go
as
ahead.
being one of the Legion of Skanks, which is self-described, not inaccurately,
Yeah.
as the most offensive podcast on earth. Like as if like everything we say on Skanks is here, but as soon as you mention genocide, that's the one where it's like, Jay, hold me, I can't take it.
Right. Well, that's also, yeah, that's definitely part of it too. Like I live in the world of like offensive shit. So I'm not like, oh my God, I've never heard such things
Right.
before. And I also think that there's a thing like being a comedian or humorist or whatever, you just kind of realize that it's like, there's, you play around a lot with the idea of the power of words and how much power they actually have over you. And I'm like, yeah, your words completely powerless. To me, like when I see these kind of like the woke left or even the woke libertarian sliver or any of them, when I see them like flipping out about the alt-right, like they hate black people or they hate Jews or whatever, it almost like to me feels like if you, when like you've probably seen in New York City before where they have the black Israelites,
Yeah.
and they'll be they'll be saying all this dumb racist shit, and if you were to pass by them, which occasionally people do, but if you were to pass by them and be like, that's appalling, you cannot say that to me, which this is a ridiculous, they're to be laughed at, and then to continue walking on with your day, and that's just the appropriate way because they have no power over you. No,
Right.
if tomorrow like Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi were like, we really got to do something about the Jews, I'd be like, hey, okay, now this is serious. This we
Right.
should probably worry about. Like if someone with a lot of power had that attitude, sure, that's it. But no, I'm not worried about powerless people. And in terms of like the arguments that they make, it's just I find much of it, not all of it, but much of it, to just be this kind of, especially when they get to the more conspiratorial stuff, it's this ridiculous circular logic where, like, as what you, the point I think you were making when talking about it right after you put out the new right, was that it was like, look, this is a heads I lose, tails you win game. So I'm just not going to play this game because this isn't an honest game. And so they'll do these things where they'll be like, well, Jewish influence was completely behind it is completely behind central banking and whatever, communism, and name like 5 other things, that Jewish. And I'll be like, okay, well, I'm Jewish and I am against all of those things, and here is a list of great Jewish thinkers who are all against all of those things. And they'll be like, that's also part of the Jewish conspiracy, to lead the opposition against them. And you're like, okay, well, now there's a standard where no piece of evidence could prove me right. So why even engage?
It's just baffling to me, the idea that if there was no Jews in America, and if Israel didn't exist, that George Bush and Dick Cheney wouldn't be looking for places to have war.
Yeah.
Like that to me is really just mind-boggling. This has been 100 years since Woodrow Wilson. They will look for, and we see this in CNN and any corporate media outlet, as soon as there's virtually any excuse to send in troops and have U.S. hegemony over every area of the world. This was the whole point of the Cold War.
And world domination has gone back way before America existed. I mean, this has always been, something that is no. Now that doesn't mean, of course, that like Israel doesn't have any influence or that there isn't guilty parties associated with, like that, like that's all legitimate. But to just make it that this is somehow inherently a Jewish problem, or that it, with the removal of Jews, therefore this problem doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, I think all of that is silly. I also think that, and I'm not a fan of the government of Israel or governments anywhere really, but I also think that while there is a lot of like Israel does attempt to exert influence and pressure over America, but if we're being honest about this whole thing, they're our satellite, not the other way around.
Right.
This is the American empire, not the Israeli empire. And the idea that like as if America hasn't exerted influence over Israel, it's ridiculous to view this through the lens of like, oh, it's just those Jews manipulating the completely innocent America who's, like it's only wants what's best, when clearly it's like there's a whole lot of other people involved in this.
What continent aren't we involved in? I mean, we have a huge presence in South Korea. They were openly talking about toppling the government in Venezuela, which is an extremely evil government. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. Central America, there's several countries that are basically satellite states of the United States. NATO and Europe is like, okay, maybe Africa is the one.
I guess maybe we're not like super deep into Africa, but I mean, anything like on even the northern half of Africa. We had military presence. We have a war that we've been fighting, like a kind of like a covert CIA-led war in Somalia for 20 years now. We've had troops in Niger. We've had troops in Egypt. We overthrew the government. And then whatever, we propped up the government there. Then they voted in the Muslim Brotherhood. Then we overthrew them and put the military back in charge. I mean, we are, and that expanded greatly under Obama, the presence in Africa. So yeah, maybe, there are parts of Africa, I suppose, that we're not involved in, but yeah, no, there's no continent. We even just sent a bunch of military support to Australia this year. I was just going to say,
the one continent we need more of a military presence is we need to go in and liberate Australia. Like, that's the one where I'm like, all right, I can understand the neocon argument that we have to overthrow that government and install freedom.
Let me just say with the caveat that I don't agree with that argument, and that if you care about the people of Australia, it doesn't work out too well for the people when America goes in to liberate you. So there's a strong argument against it. But I do think you could say there is a stronger argument for regime change in Australia than there has been for any one of the neocon wars post 9/11. I do. Yes, because number one,
you need to tweet that out.
Well, look, you would say there's a Western, all of the problems that they say with, like imposing our, way of life on Iraq. Like, well, this isn't their culture and they don't believe it. It's like, oh, well, this is Australia's culture. They have a Western culture. They have a British common law, ancestry, just like we do, all these other things. Their government just went totalitarian. It's less than 2 years old. This is something that could easily go back to just what it was in 2019. We're not like, oh, you have to go through the Enlightenment now to finally catch up to where we are with Jeffersonian republicanism or something. So again, opposed to the idea, but a stronger justification than Iraq, for sure.
Hey guys, you ever feel like you're being followed around the internet and maybe advertisers know a bit too much about you? So IPVanish VPN helps you take back your privacy and helps you become anonymous on the internet. So it's a virtual private network, a VPN for short, which is a tool that helps you browse the internet. You can use IPVanish on your computer, tablet, phone, Fire Stick when you stream media. When you use a VPN, all your data is encrypted. What you're reading, what you're watching, what you're searching, whatever it is you're doing. And it's important because what you're doing on the internet isn't anyone's business but yours. IPVanish is offering for listeners of the show 65% off their annual plan. It's only $375 a month to protect yourself. Super easy to use, even for you boomers. You turn it on with one click, and it runs in the background to protect you while you're browsing the web. If you run into a problem, IPVanish has 24/7 support by email, chat, and phone. All you got to do is go to ipvanish.com/malice. Use promo code MALICE, MALICE. You get 65% off. Their annual plan is just $44.99 for a year with our discount. This is the time to sign up. IPVanish is the best. They've got 4.7 out of 5 on Trustpilot with more than 6,000 reviews. All you got to remember is ipvanish.com/malice to get the deal and start protecting your data online. Hey guys, Your Welcome is brought to you by Progressive. Progressive wants to make sure you're getting what you want by helping you save money on car insurance. Drivers who save by switching to Progressive save over $700 on average, and customers can qualify for an average of 6 discounts, when they sign up. Discounts like having multiple vehicles on your policy. Progressive offers outstanding coverage and award-winning claim service. Day or night, 24/7. They've got customer support 365 days a year, 366 on leap year. When you need them most, they're at their best. A little off your rate each month goes a long way. You can get a quote today at progressive.com and see why 4 out of 5 new auto customers recommend Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company affiliates, national annual average insurance savings by new customers surveyed who save with Progressive between June 20th and May 21st. Potential savings may vary. Discounts vary, are not available in all states and situations. Let's get back to my progressive friend, Dave Smith. I saw you we're going to get a little inside baseball, but I think this kind of stuff does have much stronger influence on the broader political argument than people realize. I saw you got into it, or it basically was one-sided with Alex Naratash, however you pronounce his name. I'm not trying to disrespect him. I'm not familiar how to pronounce his name. He works at Cato. I think he's their immigrant guy. And what's amazing about Cato and other blue-pilled libertarian outlets, someone yesterday on again on Twitter tweeted out this great comment that I retweeted. He goes, "The cathedral still acts as if 3 people have microphones instead of 350 million." And they're in the model, the DC model, and they're not entirely incorrect, that basically they can pretend that entire swaths of people don't exist. And if your entire mechanism for receiving news is corporate media outlets and not social media, you would be oblivious to, these entire swaths of arguments. Very famously, this was attempted to be done to Ron Paul during, I believe it was both his campaigns, but especially his second campaign. And it was Jon Stewart, who just had clip after clip of all these talking heads literally acting as if Ron Paul didn't exist. They put up the polls, and it'd be like Mitt Romney, Ron Paul, and whoever, John Huntsman, I don't remember who it was. And they'd be like, well, Mitt Romney's doing great. John Huntsman's right behind. And it's like, we see the name on the screen.
They even put it there. And I guess to try to understand them a little bit better, you would have to understand that this was a very successful strategy for a very long time. It was really not until the internet that this stopped working. And that was even true with Ron Paul. The reason Ron Paul picked up so much steam was because people could just YouTube his videos. And so it was like, oh, well, you kind of can't stop, or at least at the time, you couldn't stop that from being viewed. And that was how he was breaking fundraising records at the time. And this was all done online. So it wasn't, this would have been a very successful way of dealing with Ron Paul in previous generations. And it was done with tremendous effect. I mean, if you think about the John Birch Society had an incredibly strong grassroots organization. They were a serious, organization that was very ingrained into the American conservative movement, and they were completely rooted out because if Bill Buckley got him out of National Review, they weren't going to be on the TV anymore. They weren't going to be in the newspapers anymore. And that's it. And all those people were telling you they're a bunch of racists.
Right.
Which isn't even true. They were conspiracy kooks, but they weren't really racists. And there was a few of them, but
there was plenty. They did the tap dance sometimes. When you have a group, there's going to be a bell curve, and some are going to be on this edge, some are going to be on that edge. Yeah.
No, but in general, what they were was really conspiratorial to, in my opinion, kind of goofy levels. Eisenhower was working for the Soviet Union and all this stuff. But anyway, when the only people who have the microphones are saying these are a bunch of evil, racist, crazy people, and you don't have a microphone back, that's a really effective strategy. And so it's almost like they're still using this strategy, but obviously the game has changed. And it's like, you were playing on like a 7-foot hoop, and now we raised it up to 10 feet, and you're still shooting for this 7-foot hoop. Like, how can you not see that your strategy has to change now? And so, again, I'm not saying that this Alex guy is involved in this cabal or anything. I'm just saying that this is the culture. These are the tactics that you use. And so he's just kind of living that out.
It's also, he's got an office in Washington and a title at a prestigious, recognized institution. You're a jackass on a microphone. Do the math, right? It's right. No, but I mean, that's the logic. It's do the math. Which one of these people knows what they're talking about? Jackass on a mic, or look, I've got a suit.
Yeah. Oh, and look, I'll even be the first one to admit that does kind of sound right.
Yeah.
Even as I hear you say that, I'm like, yeah, probably that guy, right? But it's just, this is kind of like the institutional rot that is systemic across our country, is that all these people in these institutions just don't think right anymore. And so it is actually the case that a jackass like me could be more right on some of these important issues. And anyway, the story, for people who don't know the story with this Alex guy, which was what was so strange about it, is that so he, I guess, challenged me to a debate a while back, and I guess I didn't see this. Like, I don't, this was shown to me later. But he was like, I'd love to debate Dave on immigration anytime. Like, I'll change my schedule or something like that. Like, he was like, I'll change my schedule to go debate Dave on immigration. And then, and I'm blanking on what prompted this, but then he went on the whole thing where he was saying, I'm not a libertarian because I don't support open borders under current circumstances. And so he was that, and then I was like, okay,
can I just interrupt, because this is something that this is one of the many reasons I don't call myself a libertarian. It's amazing how many people feel themselves comfortable gatekeeping. Yeah. And it's like, who are you? I mean, maybe if you were the head of the Cato Institute, that would wrap my head. Like, who are you to decree this is the one issue? And if you believe, like, they do this all the time with, like, abortion's one, Israel's another one, open borders is one. There's all these issues where, like, if you don't believe with this, you can't possibly
but they do. But anarchists do the same thing. I mean, I see it's more common in libertarian circles, but I see left anarchists telling right anarchists they're not really anarchists, and vice versa all the time, or you're not really an anarchist, you know. And so it's, you know, I like, to me that doesn't.
But it just seems odd to me that, like, the one issue, it's like, oh, the one issue you're concerned about is the one issue everyone has to be concerned about. You don't see anything a little bit fatuous with this logic?
Yes, no, yes, I'm with you on that. But also that stuff, to me, whatever, I find that silly. Just, you're not a libertarian because it's like, okay, all right,
am I wrong though?
Like, yeah, whatever. Then according to you, I'm not a libertarian. Okay, right. But so then when he said that, I was like, well, why don't you debate? And what I proposed to him was, I go, why don't you debate me on that? Why don't you debate that not being for this issue means you're not a libertarian? So in other words, like, we could do the immigration debate, but also let's couple in with it why this is the issue to you. And I thought that was a much more interesting conversation.
Yeah, I agree.
Because then it would get into, like, how have you decided? So you got guys at Cato, your organization, that are arguing the libertarian case for vaccine passports, for vaccine mandates. And like, well, so that's okay. You're allowed to be bad on that issue
for the draft.
I can't right. And then I thought it would be a bigger thing. And then people kind of accused me of being like, oh, but you won't just debate immigration with him like he challenged you to. You're saying that you want to debate this thing. And I was like, well, he called me. He said I'm not a libertarian, so shouldn't he defend that? That was kind of my take. So then, unbeknownst to me, this other group, the Town Circle guys, they started with this kid, Ben. He was the one who, like, I think got them to start it up. They started a fundraiser to get us to debate just the straight immigration debate. And they raised a ton of money off of it. They raised, like, it was like, you know, you pledge, and then if the debate happens, you have to donate the money to charity. But if the debate doesn't happen, you get your money back. So they pledged, and they got like 10,000 meals for hungry people.
That's wonderful.
So I was like, okay, of course. Like, what am I going to say no to that? Of course. And it's the debate he wanted originally.
Yeah.
And they raised all this money for it. So I dropped my thing about it being about whether I'm a libertarian. It's just a straight immigration debate, the one he wanted to do. And there's 10,000 meals being raised for hungry kids. And he backed out. And he said, no, I don't want to do it. Dave's not worth my time, or something like that.
Wait, do you have those two tweets side by side, him challenging you and then him saying
I don't have them, but they're there. I'll tell you, after this episode, somebody will do the work for me. You will be given both of these tweets. The screenshots
and I'll
are all out there.
I'll be glad to retweet it side by side.
Honestly, like, at this point, I don't even, like, care anymore. But so what ended up happening?
Well, you should care, because they're a money pit. And the whole argument is Cato, it takes a lot of money and they do a lot of good work. That's not even a question, especially when they're advocating for poor people who are being screwed by, like, government regulation. They're superb on that. And they're like, this is really, they care about people like that. And I think it's just wonderful stuff.
And there's a lot of really good people at Cato, like really smart, really good people at Cato.
But if they're going to be saying that we're kind of the outsiders swinging for the fences, and then at the same time, they're not willing to engage with the masses and kind of like podcasters and things like that, and they're only going to be talking at Congress, and Congress is not listening to them, you know, they've got some accountability to be had here.
Yeah, well, I agree with that. But so I kind of, like, almost forgot about, like, this was out of my, you know, head, like, whatever. This was an old thing. It was an
people ask you to debate every 5 minutes.
By the way, I also reached out to him at one point, because this was back when our mutual very good friend Tom Woods, when he was sick and in the hospital, and some of the left libertarian types were like saying really nasty shit. And he had a tweet where he called them out. And he was like, hey guys, like I disagree with Tom on some stuff too, but could we be like decent human beings here? Like the guy's in the hospital and has 5 daughters. Like, what are you wishing ill on him? Like about, and I messaged him after that. And I was like, hey, Alex, just so you know, like, I know things got a little, tense with us, but I really appreciated what you said about my friend Tom there.
Yeah.
Just so, never responded to me, never anything like that. But you're like, okay, whatever. But in my mind, it was like, this is kind of done and whatever. So then they were like, Mark Claire was like, which I do like a lot of debates on his show, but love Mark Claire, Lines of Liberty. He's great. And he was like, well, let's do the immigration debate with someone, since he doesn't want to do it and people wanted this debate. Let's do it with someone. The money's already gone because that's what people pledged for that debate. And so that's not happening. But so I was like, well, let's do, I forget, maybe he suggested it or I suggested it, but it was like, let's do Brian Kaplan, because that's like the guy. Let me take the hardest challenge I could get. And Brian wasn't able to do it. I think like a scheduling thing or something. He's like, I'm busy, I'm working on a book or something. Couldn't do it. So then we were like, oh, who should we get? And we ended up getting Spike Cohen to do the debate, who I was like, okay, that's a real good, like he's really smart, really good libertarian, and also just someone I get along with. I like Spike a lot. And so we did the debate, and the debate came out. And then fucking this Alex guy starts like fucking tweeting about what an idiot I am and how wrong my points in the debate were, but he's completely straw manning what I said. Like, he's not responding to the argument at all that I made in the debate. He's responding to like either like one snippet sentence or something like that, or at certain points just blatantly going, he's like, well, Dave would probably say blah blah blah, something I've never even kind of said, and then
so it's like what it's
I couldn't help myself. You're like, dude, you fucking bitched out of the debate and left 10,000 meals on the table, and now you're back to talking shit to me on Twitter.
No, he's like, talking shit to hypothetical crazy. You.
Yeah, like not even me. Like just blatantly, like I mean, I could fucking find it probably, the tweet.
No, it's just really funny when people are like, oh, well, like they'll do these like mental leaps, and it's like, oh, well, you don't hate Trump, so you think it's a good thing when he did X, Y, and Z. It's like, you don't have to speculate as to what I think. I can tell you.
Of all the criticisms of me, the idea that I don't tell you how I feel about these issues, like that I'm not just like, here is my hand, this is how I feel about all of these things. I'm willing to talk about the most controversial shit too. Like, that's one of the things that I think separates me from a lot of these Cato types, is that like, there's like no issue that I don't run away from. And I'll say things that I know are like, okay, this could easily be misconstrued, this could easily be used against me, but I'm like, it's a controversial topic and I like those, they're interesting. So I'll tell you, this is what I think about it. Like, I don't, there's whatever, any topic you could think of. So, but this just like drove me crazy that he was talking shit. And then at one point, what he tweeted something that really got, I mean, it got so ratioed and blew up so much of people being like just dunking on him.
And just one more thing,
but it was the perfect blue pilled take.
These people think getting ratioed means they're winning, because like, look, I've upset all these Nazis.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. It's like, look, it's like a comedian, who just gets booed off every stage, and you're going like, look, that's how great I am at this. No one ever laughs at my jokes. That's how excellent these jokes are.
Is that a Lewis quote?
I mean, it's worked out surprisingly well for him. He's built a career off this mentality. But so he tweeted, because people were like, dude, which obviously like he deserved the shit he was getting. I mean, it's like, look, don't do the debate if you don't want to do the debate. Leave the money on the table if you want to. Fine. I'm not worth your time. I mean, okay, you did challenge me to it, and then there was money raised, so that doesn't make you look great. But okay, you've decided I'm not worth your time. Fine. How can I argue with that? I'm sure there are people who would challenge me or you to a debate who would be like, that's not worth my time.
I don't do debates. Sure. I don't do anything.
I'm just saying, like, someone could challenge you tomorrow and you'd be like,
oh, that happens all the time.
Like, I'm not interested in this. So, and I'm sure that that's true with me too. There's probably lots of people who'd want to debate me who I'm not going to debate. So, okay, fine, fair enough. But to then back out of it, and then when I do it with the other guy, then not even like in a serious way, like, let me take on the argument that was made here, but to just be arguing against what you say I would have said, that just pissed me off. But so he tweeted back to Tho Bishop, who I love, Tho.
Yeah, of course. Tho was the one who gave me that picture behind me.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, Tho is over at the Mises Institute. He's a great guy, really, really smart guy, and someone I get along with a lot. And so he was kind of like catching my back in the situation. And he's like, dude, what are you doing here? Like you were a coward and backed out of this, and now you're talking shit. And Alex responds and he goes, yeah, I don't think I'm a coward. I debated Tucker Carlson on the topic, and Tucker Carlson gets millions of views. And so if I'm willing to go do that, I don't think I need to go on a podcast that no one's ever heard of and debate a nobody or something like that.
Bigger audience than him by far.
And so this is what everyone's talking about, where it really is. It's just so funny that you're like, oh, okay. It's the perfect example of what you're talking about. It's like he has in his mind, it's like, I'm a nobody. And okay.
No, hold on. No, I got to correct you. I have to interrupt and correct you. He doesn't have that in his mind. He wants the audience to have that in their mind.
Yes, sure. But that's the mentality that this is how you deal with this. Like, well, look, this guy's a nobody. I am, the senior head of immigration studies at the Cato
what's Dave
Institute.
Smith's credential?
Exactly.
Some comedy special.
And you're like, and yeah, that is the answer. But
yeah,
like, you're like, well, here's the thing, right? Like Twitter has this follower function, which happens to be publicly available information
and objective.
And so, it's like and so you have like 20,000 followers and I have like 175,000 followers. And so for you to be like, oh, this guy's a nobody, it really smacks of this, like how you're defining nobody is beltway institutional credentials, rather than because if you wanted to say who has more popular support amongst the movement of people who believe in liberty, there's no question about it there. But I'm fine with saying, yes, you do have more beltway institutionalized credentials than I do. Of course. But I do, this is just objective, but I have way more popular support amongst the movement. And the truth is that I would be giving him a platform if he wanted to come on and have this debate with
Dave,
me. Like, more people will watch him than have heard of him. Like,
no one's asking him to host Freedom Fest. Why is Freedom Fest being hosted by someone's no one's heard of?
Because they actually want to sell tickets to their event, and they know what will help sell tickets to their event. And like, so this is, so anyway, it was just a real interest. And then of course people are like, well, like, what is this? Like, even by the own logic of it, you're like, okay, so Tucker, look, I've never been on Tucker. And Tucker's got a big show. He gets like over 4 million viewers an episode or something in that ballpark. And it's like, okay, so you were on that and you debated this and you still have way less followers.
Yeah.
So where does where does the logic of this come in? So despite you getting all of this stuff, you still have been unable to generate interest in what you have to say. And also, the other thing about it is that it's like, well, first off, I've been on way bigger shows than Tucker Carlson. And nothing against Tucker. I'd love to go on his show. You were great on it. Alex did a good job when he was on it, but I've been on bigger shows than that. And it's also, when you're talking about a debate, the way we're talking about it, like what me and Spike did was like a 90-minute debate. You're usually talking about like really hammering through the nuance of these ideas and at least having more of a long form to make your case. It's like, yeah, you argued for 4 minutes with Tucker Carlson 4 years ago.
Yeah.
It's like a debate on a cable news show which we've all done before. We've all argued with people on panels and stuff, but let's get real. It's a soundbite off. It's who can get like their soundbite off first and who can slam the last guy's soundbite better. But it's not a real debate. You just don't have time for that any more than Twitter is a real debate. Like, you don't have time for that shit. So anyway, the whole thing was kind of revealing to me and silly, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know exactly what it is. My guess is that it's something like with you, like what we were talking about with the Anarchist Handbook, where I think it does bother these guys that we have so much more support within the movement that they're supposed to speak for.
And outside of the movement.
Well, yes, that's for sure too. But those two things are related, because that's part of like why we bring people into agreeing with us on this stuff, is because we're able to talk to people who are not here already. And I mean, the truth is that I don't know, I'm not a mind reader, but if Alex could have an audience 10 times larger than he has, I think he would prefer to have that. If you asked me, would I rather have a much smaller audience, but work at Cato as the director of immigration studies? You're like, that sounds like a nightmare. Yeah. Like, I'd contemplate shooting myself in the face I'd be like, I have to stay strong for my family. I can't kill myself right now. I have to go to Washington and work for But like, to me, that's like, I don't have any envy of that role, but I don't think that's true the other way around. And so I think that's where kind of like this thing, like I'm not going like, you're not a libertarian. I'm not like attacking him that way. I don't know. He's fine, I'm sure. He could make a really good data-based argument for why we should have more immigration. I disagree with it.
Hey guys, underwear model and all-around general hunk, Michael Malice here. Want to talk to you about my favorite underwear, and they're going to be your favorite underwear. That's Sheath underwear. If you go to sheathunderwear.com and use promo code Malice, you get 20% off. Why is Sheath awesome? Well, first of all, it's made from this amazing fabric, which keeps you cool in the hot weather and keeps you warm in the cold weather. They've got 2 pouches, a dual pouch technology, which is what makes Sheath unique. If you go to sheathunderwear.com and use promo code Malice, you're going to have comfort, you're going to have performance, you're going to have mobility, and you're going to get one step closer to being an underwear stud, such as myself. Support the underwear that supports you. That's sheathunderwear.com, promo code Malice for 20% off. I wear them every day because I enjoy the product. Guys, I want to take a second to talk to you about Crowd Health. This is a sponsor I think has a product that's a really great idea. When it comes to healthcare, it's important to make sure you're getting your money's worth. So Crowd Health is a flexible and affordable healthcare option without the hassle of insurance. If you go to joincrowdhealth.com/99, you can find out how Crowd Health can help you save 40 to 60% healthcare costs each year. It's not health insurance. It's a modern way to pay medical expenses. What Crowd Health is a community of people who are tired of paying into a broken system. So being in the Crowd Health community saves you hundreds of dollars monthly and puts thousands of dollars in your pocket. Here's how it works. You use their app. You find nearly any doctor in the country with a quality ranking score. You scan the bill, you throw them away. Crowd Health takes from there. You press a button to receive virtual care anytime, anywhere. How does it work? They get rid of the insurance middleman and they pass the savings to the members because 100% of your monthly membership pays for actual healthcare costs, which keeps the Crowd Health community staying healthy while keeping more money in your pocket. And they're able to do this because it's a community of health conscious members. They've got a great offer for you guys. The first 6 months are just $99 a month. That's a saving. It's almost 50% off their standard pricing, a lot less than those high deductible plans. Go to joincrowdhealth.com/99. Use code welcome at sign up. That's joincrowdhealth.com/99 and use promo code welcome at sign up. Crowd Health is not health insurance. It's a community powered alternative. Terms and conditions may apply. Let's get back to the show. And you don't have to be an open borders person to make the argument that immigrants are often vilified unnecessarily and that immigrants are net contributors or they commit crime at lower rates. These are all statistical things. So there's lots of stuff that he does that's extremely useful and factual.
Sure. And also, and I think this is, again, it breaks a lot of binary brains. And this immigration topic really, I've found out really breaks binary brains for people who like can't understand and I laid it out so clearly in the Spike debate. And you still have these people who are like, it just really unable to grapple with the argument. But I do not support open borders. I also have nothing but positive thoughts about immigrants in general. I've had a lot of experiences with immigrants, both legal and illegal. And overall, it's been really positive, like some really great people. I hate cops. And I'm still not for open borders. So it's almost like they want to make it. It's like, well, who are you for? Border Patrol or the immigrants, And you're like, no, that's not exactly my point. Right. The point, essentially, the argument is this. I tried to put it this way the other day on my show, but it's like, it's that government controlling land and opening it up to everybody is not government doing nothing. And that's not the anarchist win. That's not the libertarian win. That in itself can be an act of aggression depending on the circumstances. And so obviously government closing borders could also be an act of aggression depending on the circumstances. It's really about what the property owners would have wanted and the fact that they're not getting to make those decisions. So in other words, if you take, like, say, the Amish, take an example like an Amish community. And if me or you tried to go rent one of their buildings on their property, they're not going to rent to us, because they're like, no, I don't want you coming in here with your car and your fucking phone and all of this. It's like, no, we want Amish people living in our preferred culture the way we want them to live. And that's a libertarian or an anarchist would say that's their right to do that. Now, if the government were to come in and rob from all the Amish people and build roads throughout the Amish community and then control the border of the Amish community and then say, we're opening the borders and we're opening all of the roads, and we're also going to pass a law that says you can't discriminate against who you rent to on your property. That is not the libertarian position.
Yeah.
That is not somehow now like, oh, well, that's good because the government's not doing anything to nobody. It's like, no, the government did something to everybody there. They've essentially created a situation where those property owners are no longer able. And when you have a situation in America, this is not perfect. It's very difficult when you extrapolate out to like 300 plus million people. But when you have a situation in the country where about 90% of the country is opposed to open borders, and then you have libertarians saying, well, we want open borders. It's like, okay, that's actually not consistent with like liberty. That's not consistent with the anti-statist pro-property owners, like point of view. That's essentially the argument that I made for 90 minutes with a lot more detail. But none of that is ever addressed by any of these guys. Brian Kaplan and all these guys, who I really like Brian Kaplan a lot. I think he's crazy smart. And I really loved his book on education. But the argument of like, well, it would improve the economy. It's like, okay, but that's not really the libertarian point of view either. Lots of things might improve the economy. Yeah, right. Keeping interest rates low this year might improve the economy for this year. That doesn't mean we support it, because that's not what an honest free market is. I love it when people think of like second order of operations strategies. Like, for example, and people who have a certain intelligence level can't wrap their heads around it. Hillary Clinton gave us a balanced budget. Like, before, when Bill Clinton got into office in 92, he put Hillary, who had no experience in this field, in charge of healthcare. They had meetings in secret. She bungled it so badly and was so repulsive and arrogant that the Republicans got Congress for the first time in 40 years, and they forced through a balanced budget and certain other things. Now, if you try to tell people that sometimes a bad opponent is more useful than someone who's a weak ally, like a Romney wouldn't have gotten a balanced budget if Romney had been president, right? If you're a Republican. But this is what ended up happening. Now, I'm not saying you should always want for the bad opponent, because sometimes that bad opponent is going to get bad things. But there are some times when you go the other way, it gets what you want. Like a boomerang, they can't wrap their heads around this. It is something very counterintuitive. And Kaplan makes the superb argument that having more immigration tends to get people to vote more nativist and right wing. And a great example of this is the big anti-open borders argument is the 1965 Immigration Act, which really kind of opened the floodgates in many ways to have immigrants all over. Look at the Republican Party in 1965 and look at the Republican Party that happened at like 15 years later. You had Reagan, which was unthinkable because in 64, when Goldwater, who was basically the Reagan candidate, he had the biggest landslide defeat in like American history, had like 30%, something crazy. And then 16 years later, and after that, the Republican Party went so much further to the right as a result. No, I agree with you on that. I think that is a really good kind of counter argument to the kind of like demographics are destiny type argument, which I completely reject and I think is silly. And I also think it's very difficult to make these predictions about how things are going to work if we do X, or because it's for the same reason that it's very hard to predict the future in general, and that even really, really smart people who tried to predict what the year 2000 was going to look like in the year 1900 would get it completely wrong, because there's just so many.
No, they said we'd have bigger Zeppelins.
Yeah, right. There's so many near infinite variables that what are you even saying here? Like so you have to kind of, it's very hard to predict, but like, again, it's not just some economic calculation to say, if we open the borders, what would happen? You're like, well, there's also a lot of context to like what the country is like right now, and what the reactions on all sides would be, and what it's not just like the idea that if you open the borders in America in 1950 from Europe, And if you open the borders in the year 2022 from Latin America, same outcome.
Right. Yeah.
Same at like what? No, there's no reason to think that. I mean, like for one, we are now in the middle of, you know, this as it's been dubbed mass psychosis over COVID. We're a crumbling empire. We're in a white hot culture war, you know, like rampant inflation, like both, you know, kind of populist left and right wing movements rising up. Like this is all very different than things were in the 1950s. Why would you expect the same exact results from that, the same economic calculation? I mean, it's so I agree. I think there's a lot of different ways this can work, and it's not always oftentimes it's like in a counterintuitive way. I look already, I think me and you have really been proven right about Joe Biden getting in there. I mean, you already look at how much better a situation the right wing in America is in this year than they were a year ago. And that's at this point, I think I really think it's very hard to argue that it would have been better for the right wing if Trump had
you just made the
year.
perfect segue, because I was going to bring that up. I was on Glenn Beck's show last week, and
you did it again?
Oh yeah, it wasn't a podcast. I was just on his radio show. I'm going to be regular on the radio show now.
Oh, that's great.
And I really kind of had one of those, you know how sometimes you wake up and something just clicks and you're like, oh, you know, like when maybe you're seeing both sides of an issue and then you're like, oh wait, no, this is really not a two-sided issue. And it was I was on his show on the 7th, and what really bothered me, it just clicked. I'm like, was January 6th and how Trump treated those people. And I'm like, you know what? This is really, really bad and a problem. And conservatives are going to have to wake the F up if they're going to run this guy again. Because the point I made on Glenn Beck, I go, for him, loyalty was very much a one-way street. So the argument we had in 2016 and 2015 is he knows all the best people. He's going to bring in, he knows the best ones and he knows the worst ones. He knows the guys who are con artists and he knows the ones who are killers, real killers, right? And he's bringing in for Secretary of State, like the head of Exxon. He's bringing in Reince Priebus. But the other issue is, as soon as these people come in and he fires them or they quit, he's denouncing them as morons and screw ups. John Bolton was an ass. Steve Bannon was sloppy. Steve was begging for his job back. You know, the Exxon guy was an idiot. Omarosa turned on him. It's like, but you're the common, you know, it's how, like when you have a girl who reaches her 40s and like all men suck. It's like, you're the common thread here.
Yeah.
So but the thing is, I can even wrap my head around that because you have to counterpunch and he's very great at counterpunching. But the January 6 people who were languishing in prison, those were your guys. Those were your ride or die guys who really believed in you, who really thought you were saving America. And Tucker Carlson is the one who's defending them, and you're sitting on your hands. Yeah, and that really doesn't sit right with me.
And you don't have to buy into kind of like the corporate press hysteria about what January 6th was, or the not so borderline, but just completely conspiratorial view that it's like this was all planned and directed and Trump sent them in and this was a coup attempt and all of this kind of nonsense. But you also can recognize like the responsibility that Donald Trump holds in that position. And I know, like, I feel it just having like the audience I have, where it's like you do feel like this responsibility to, like, especially when you're talking about really like radical things and how how evil the government is, to always kind of make sure like, yo, I'm not encouraging anyone to do anything stupid here.
Yeah.
Like, make sure you're aware of that. Like, don't break any laws, don't do anything stupid. And if I were to, if I were like giving a speech somewhere, let's say me and you were giving a speech, we're having a rally, the Michael Malice, Dave Smith rally, and we got all these young guys and they're like, yeah, and they're rallied up and we're talking about how evil the cops are. It's like the cops go around and violate all of our basic rights. Like, I can't protect myself and my family because of them. These pigs ruin everything and they get away with it. They kill people and they get away with it. They don't live under the same rule we do. And we're all going to march down to the police station right now and we're going to let them know how we feel. And then like, a bunch of my people end up like going in there and like just getting killed. I'd feel so responsible for that. And like what Donald Trump did to these guys is he did work them up into a frenzy and tell them, based without having really much factual evidence to show them, that your country has just been stolen from you and that this whole thing is illegitimate. And now, by the way, we're going to go march right outside where they're certifying the election. And we're going to keep it peaceful, but like, we're going to go march right there. And to the fact that he feels no responsibility to now stand up for his people, many of whom did nothing more than just entered the building.
Right.
You know, it's one thing if it's like the people who, like, I don't know, roughed up a cop or like even broke shit, but you're talking about the people who just entered the building, who are being held in solitary. And the fact that he doesn't even speak up for them is like just appalling.
So, and
like, that's not a leader.
Hey guys, Michael Malice here. Want to talk to you about one of my favorite sponsors, and that is Fume. It's 2022. January is about positive change, and the most positive change you can make is quitting smoking. And Fume helps you do that in a safe, effective way. Going cold turkey works for some people. It's a lot easier if you have an incremental step to get you off that hand-to-mouth habit of cigarettes. So what is Fume? Fume is a wood inhaler, handcrafted in Canada, to replace the cigarette or your vape, whatever it is. You insert one of their cores at the end, which are infused with natural plants like peppermint or cinnamon. No smoke, no vape, no nicotine, but you're standing there doing that same motion. So psychologically it helps you break that habit. They've got a dozen different flavors. They've got chai, they've got peppermint, black pepper. Their best seller is called Conquer. It's got an earthy, minty flavor. All you have to do is go to breathefume.com/malice. That's BREATHEFUM.com/malice. Use promo code malice10. You get 10% off your order. They're doing their smoke-free January sale. You get 20% off their most popular cores already, and you get another 10% if you use promo code malice10. Please consider this, because if you're smoking, you know it's very expensive, and you know even more, it's having an expensive effect on your health. And we want most of you to be with us happy and healthy for the rest of the year.
This is Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Pedicy.
I love hearing people's stories of resilience and grit. This is why I created this podcast.
We are very excited to welcome Jim Gaffigan, Yasmin Mohammed, Glenn Beck, Tim Dillon, Abigail Schreier, Jeff Garland, Ayan Hirsi Ali, Sam Harris, Heather Hying,
Jonah Goldberg,
Ben Shapiro, Glenn Greenwald, Sarah Shahi, Colin Quinn.
If there's a culture of victimhood, then let's tell stories of grit and survival.
Subscribe and listen now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Let's get back to the show. And but this is also in terms of loyalty being a one-way street. When President Clinton was on his way out, he pardoned a few literal terrorists, Puerto Rican terrorists. I think I forgot the organization called FALN, maybe something like that. Andrew Cuomo, when he was just kicked out of office, he pardoned a literal terrorist, one of the weathermen.
Right.
Trump, on his way out, pardoned very few people. There were so many people who stuck their necks out for him, and he just sat on his hands and didn't reciprocate. That's number one. The other point I made with Glenn Beck is, how is he going to bring, and this I said explicitly, I go, this is not his fault. How is he going to bring in any outsider? If I'm like a big shot CEO, if I'm some, whiz kid, having that on my resume is going to ruin my career. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying that's his fault at all, but why would I stick my neck out for this guy if as soon as I leave, I'm going to be called a putz and a loser. Yeah. And then if I try to look for another job, I'm going to be tainted for the rest of my life. How is he going to have that pool, which normally a president would have the binders full of resumes?
Yeah, and this is so like my guy.
Yeah.
But this is also a big problem, whether or not it is his fault. And the truth is, it's probably his fault to some degree. But you also have to recognize, like, just the reality of the situation. If the guy you're supporting, is going to create the most hysterical reaction in opposition to him, that is a real threat to the safety and security of the country, then okay, I'm not saying that on its own proves you can't go with that guy, but what's your plan to deal with that?
Right.
Because if you have no plan to deal with that, and your plan is like, well, we'll bitch about it on Twitter till we get kicked off, it's like, that's not a very good plan. Like, what's the plan? And so if you're just going to do that because I enjoy driving all of them crazy, it's like, all right, well, that's not a serious adult strategy. And that's just like, Donald Trump is like, they stole the election from me. And it's like, well, what's your plan? And he's like, well, I'm going to bitch about it for a few months and then leave. It's like, well, that's not much of a plan. So do you have anything? That was, if you remember that call to the Secretary of State of Georgia that got leaked, and they were all like, oh, this is so fucked up, he's trying to pressure. I thought the most amazing thing about that call was that you just see how Trump had no plan.
Right.
No plan. And he's just got on the phone with him. He's like, well, we won. We definitely won. And the guy's like, yeah, I'm not really seeing that anywhere. And he's like, well, that's what it is. So I need you to go find out why it is that we won and how it is that, and the guy's like, what? I don't know. What do you want me to do here? Like, there's no evidence.
And the one promise that Trump broke that I think is unforgivable is that he was going to beat Joe Biden. Now, you can argue with a straight face, and indisputably, it wasn't Joe Biden at all. There was a huge, organization and organizational support that pushed his carcass over the finish line.
No question.
It's like, why? Wait, you're saying there's going to be less of this in 2024, and you have the power of the White House before you? There were all these machinations put in place to ensure a Biden or whoever the Democratic candidate victory was going to be. You were the president. You were the head of the Republican Party. You know about shenanigans. How did you not see this coming? How did you not have people in place to look over shoulders everywhere to make sure this didn't happen? And if you learn from your mistakes, how are you going to do differently in 2024 when you don't have the power of the Oval Office behind you? So that's a really a kind of big one. So the argument they also make is, well, any Republican is going to be treated like that. I don't agree at all that if you name whoever Republican you want, Kristi Noem, DeSantis, Larry Hogan, that it's going to be impossible for them to find people to work for them if they're president. I don't think it's the same thing.
Well, I also think that
they're not going to be insulted on the way out. If Ron DeSantis or Larry Hogan fires someone, they're not going to be the next day saying this person was a moron.
Yeah, it's highly unlikely. And I think that with Trump, I think what to me is fairly clear is that it's just like, because it's so obvious already. Everyone's he's got this amazing kind of magic about him where he gets everyone to project all of these things onto him that just don't exist from the left and the right. But it's really so obvious what he is. And you talk about loyalty and that stuff. I don't mean to sound too a prude or something, but loyalty, the guy's like fucking porn stars while his wife is pregnant. This is not a guy who has loyalty in his in his utility belt. That's not one of his tools. What he is an amazing self-promoter who is vicious and hilarious and very good at getting underneath everybody's skin. But when it comes to a strategy, any type of strategy of how to wield power, any type of governing strategy, he had nothing. He got completely rolled from the very beginning. He was incapable of ever really destroying the Trump-Russia narrative, which was so absurd. They were claiming that the most famous guy in the history of the world has been a Russian spy this whole time.
Right.
And he couldn't even find a way to just give a national address and just destroy the whole thing. He wasn't even smart enough to what Trump should have done, if he had any sense of these things, would be to elevate all the good left-wing journalists who were destroying this thing. Or he could have go read Aaron Maté at The Nation. This guy's no fan of mine, and he's telling you this is all a lie cooked up by the Clintons and the CIA and the FBI. This is all nonsense. He could have handled this in so many different ways to just collapse this whole narrative on them, and instead he just tweeted witch hunt every day. And there's no real strategy there for okay, here's our objective, here's where we are, here's how we're going to get to our objective. There's none of that. It's just let's trigger everyone and have fun.
And here's one of my favorite aspects of the Trump presidency, and I know for a fact it's yours as well, was that every day we could go on social media, and the president of the United States was almost literally taking a shit on some really, really bad people in disrespectful ways that they've never been disrespected in their entire lives. They don't know how to react. And you're sitting there and you're, holy crap, this is amazing. The thing is, he's not in that position now. He's been kicked off social media. They're not going to reinstate him. So that really strong aspect, and this is, I think, the strongest argument for Trump, is that he exposed to so many people just how weak and unimpressive and really worthy of absolute contempt these people are, including, or perhaps especially, members of the Republican Party. But that's not going to happen again.
Well, and it's also the value of that is already come to fruition. We already have that. We got that value. There was tremendous value in all of that. There was tremendous value, tremendous value in but there was really I don't know if you could measure it. There were a few things that Donald Trump did that were enormously valuable that I'm grateful to him for. Number one, in a way that I think no one else could have ever done, he made it completely socially acceptable to be the biggest, bravest right winger and oppose the wars. And I think that's incredible. I don't think we can measure the value in that, because let's get real in this country. The next war does not happen without the right wing being on board with it. You always need the right wing of the country to be on board with a war. Like you cannot, you're not going to sell one of these wars just with the lefties. That's not going to happen. They're not the ones who fight them. You know what I mean? Like it's just not going to happen. And he made it. And I see this all the time. I see this with in the change in people like Greg Gutfeld. Like Greg Gutfeld will be completely comfortable to just be like, I think all these wars are stupid. He was not comfortable to say that before Trump, because that just sounds like the thing a left-wing guy says. And he doesn't want to be that, because like, look at them. Who wants to be one of them? Which understandably. But now it's like, well, that doesn't sound like what a left-winger says. It sounds like what Trump says. That's awesome. So he also exposed in a way, by making them so hysterical, just how dishonest the corporate press is, in a way that nobody else has, and there's a few other things like this, but that's all been done. There's nothing to be gained by just running that again. We got all the benefit of that. So now it's just the downside.
The point I made to Beck, and this is something conservatives really have to wrap their heads around. When Trump came into office, it was Obama's budget from 2016. The federal budget was $4 trillion. 2 years later, before COVID, and he had 2 years of Republican Congress, the budget was 4.4 trillion, a 10% increase in 2 years. How can you, as a conservative, defend the growth of government to this extent? You can't.
Yeah. No, and as you said, I thought it was a really great way to put it when on Glenn Beck's podcast, where you said, I mean, just imagine he had proposed the pre-Obama budget. I mean, it's like it would have been just the reaction would have been like hyperventilating, like, oh my God, how could you slash government to this size? I mean, if somebody proposed the budget from the year 2000 today, it would be like as if it would be seen as radical by the DC establishment as you just proposing dissolving all of government. But like, if you remember in the year 2000, we had a pretty big government. Like I remember it wasn't that long ago. And like, I was there and there was still a whole lot of government bureaucracy, and there was the welfare state and a warfare state and all of this stuff. But they can't even think about this, even with Republicans having full control of the executive and legislative branches. So yeah, that tells you something about, how untenable the idea of there being a political solution to all this stuff is to begin with.
And I can see why conservatives tend to be very loyal people. And after 4 years of being told that Trump is literally Hitler, I can see why he would talk to the people that no one talked to. And he actually did seem to enjoy their company and want to fight for them to some capacity, at least, through his rhetoric. So I can see why they feel the need to be like, this guy's been treated worse than anyone else. I'm not going to kind of throw him overboard, but they need to have this kind of come to Jesus moment about what his presidency meant. You don't have to be Hitler, but that doesn't mean that he's clearly, obviously wasn't literally Hitler or even figurative Hitler, but that doesn't mean that he wasn't like McKinley, that he wasn't like, as far as Republicans go, in terms of governing, there was a big room for improvement. Now, their counter argument is like, well, who do you have that's better? That's what the whole point of a primary system is for. Where there's 2 years to go, keep your powder dry and see who runs and see what their arguments are. And here's the other thing. They think that Trump would be unstoppable in a primary. I don't think that's true at all. I think it'd be very easy to say, Mr. President, you said X, and then you did Y, and have them side by side. And then when you have things like, well, we'll have a Democratic Congress, voters, especially Republican voters, don't like it when people use excuses.
Yeah,
they like results. Look, and that's his standard too.
That was always his standards. We're going to win. We're going to do so much winning. And whether this is fair or not, because a lot of the criticisms of Trump are really fair. A lot of the reasons why Trump shouldn't be president again are Trump's fault. A lot of the reasons are not Trump's fault, but they're still reasons nonetheless. And to me, one of them, a couple of the major ones, is just that it's like there will be violence in this country if Donald Trump is elected president again. And I'm not seeing what the benefit is that's worth that cost. Like, there will literally be, now this is not his fault. This is the fault of crazy violent left-wingers who will be violent, but still, that violence will be there. And I don't want to see bodegas get burned down for just to get Trump in. That's not worth it to me in my cost benefit analysis. But in terms of the thing you're saying with it, it's just like, well, look, winning, this is what we do. You'll be so tired of winning and we're going to win. And I got in there and we're going to win. Now, whether you blame Trump for this or the reaction to Trump for this, which I think there's a lot of blame on Trump, but certainly a lot of blame on the Democrats as well. Donald Trump's 4th year in office was the worst year in modern American history, where people were locked in their homes. Right. By the standard of liberty, by the standard of prosperity, by the standard of stability, by the standard of security, whatever standard you want to use, 2020 was an absolute nightmare of a year for this country. And that is not the fault of the virus. It's the fault of the reaction to the virus. And by the way, the fault of the virus is probably the government's fault too. But regardless, that is a loss. He lost. And then he lost to Joe Biden.
Biden.
That is really hard to rationalize if your whole thing is winning. That's a very tough thing to sell.
Yeah, I think it's going to be. The other thing is, it's perfectly acceptable now, if I'm a radio show or if I'm Facebook, to not sell ads to this guy. Like, they can say it's not being partisan. This is just about public safety and making sure people don't get hurt. They have been given an excuse to do what they wanted to do to begin with. So I can't get on social media. I can't buy ads. I can't get really high quality staffers to work my campaign. The idea that he's got this automatic path to the presidency, let alone the nomination, is not at all the case. Dave, we're running out of time. What has been your favorite part of the Trump presidency?
Ooh, my favorite part of the Trump presidency. The best moment ever that Donald Trump had was when he was in that press conference and he just told the CNN people to shut up. And then at one point he interrupted them and he went, no. I'm the president of the United States and you are fake news.
You are correct.